Recording is on.
Okay, awesome. We're all good to go.
All right. Thanks everyone for showing up. My name is Ben Price from OpenSats. This is the Bitcoin design, like kind of community review session. And what we're going to show you today is some old kind of Figma designs from our website. We have like some updates ready to go, except they're not here today. We ran into some technical problems uploading to GitHub. So we are going to be working with like a bit of older designs. That being said, later today, hopefully we can kind of publish our updates so you guys can kind of see the progress we've made kind of past these original designs. But this work was done. Well, let me back up. OpenSats is a nonprofit that is aiming to help fund and support contributors to Bitcoin Core specifically, but also like kind of related and tangential free and open source projects in the community. So that could be things like BTC Pay Server, Tor, secure communications protocols, really anything which helps Bitcoin kind of function to its fullest potential. The only requirement is that the work has to be free and open source. So kind of everyone can use it. And yeah, that's kind of our mission. And so where we are today is we have soft launched our website, and maybe I will share my screen, see if this works. So the idea is we're trying to build a platform where donors can come to our site and easily kind of search, explore, look at projects that are free and open source that people are working on. And then on the other side of it, our main users of the platform are actually going to be our like free and open source contributors, anyone working on Bitcoin Core or a related project. And the idea is that they can come in, kind of submit a project to be listed on the site. And if they are approved by our board, which the requirements are essentially you can't be a shitcoiner, and your project can't be shitcoin related, and it has to be free and open source. So as long as you kind of fit those criteria and the board can kind of approve you, you can get a landing page where you can kind of post all your links, post your team, post the work that you've done, and ideally we'll be able to facilitate direct donations through to your project to help you continue working on it. So those donations can come in the form of credit and debit card, which we'll show you in some of these design flows, as well as Bitcoin. And on the back end, all of our fiat donations will come will flow through to an exchange partner that we have and be converted into Bitcoin. And so all of our payouts, all of our treasury, everything's going to be held and eventually distributed to the contributors in Bitcoin. And so, yeah, to start, this is kind of like an ugly landing page that we built. And the idea was we essentially wanted contributors to come and kind of pre-list or pre-apply to be listed on our site when we go live with the full design platform. The one reason we have to do it this way, where you kind of apply to be listed, is because we are a nonprofit and we're shooting for 501c3 status. There's other projects in the space like GitHub sponsors. I think they have a few requirements, but like Bitcoin Dev List is another good example that we took some inspiration from, and they're more just free flowing. Anyone can kind of sign up, but because we're a 501c3, our board has to technically approve all projects and make sure they support our our charitable cause. So this is the site we spun up in the meantime, or like in the short term before we launch our full donation platform. We're open to feedback here, but honestly, this site's going to be dead in about 2 weeks. It basically just gives you an idea of who our board is, some great Bitcoiners, including some devs. Not any designers represented, I don't think. So I'm sorry about that. I'm probably I guess I'm a design focused PM. And then we've got some supporters. So Castle9 here is doing all the development work for us. And the designer, at least to date, it has wished to remain anonymous. It is a good Bitcoiner in the community though. So right now, if you go to our site, this is kind of the application page. I'll skip over all that, but essentially we're collecting some basic information: name, email, GitHub name, personal details. So this is what we would like use to pre-list for any project page on the site. So you've got the project name. So you could imagine maybe you're a designer working on BTC Pay Server. Is it free and open source? Are you the lead contributor? And we can kind of get into why we asked that question. Impact, timelines, keywords, which we'll use to kind of filter on our site, and a few other things. So that's a basic example, or like a basic outline of what we have today. And then I guess for the rest of this, we want to kind of jump into what we have in mind for our actual donation platform. If you are on the Figma page, which I think I shared in both the design Slack as well as kind of in the chat room here on Jitsi, I've outlined like.
Sorry, one second. Are people? Sorry, Ben, to cut you off. Are people able to view the Figma? Because I'm.
No.
No, I can't see the Figma.
Try creating just a share link, and don't worry about the edit access.
Okay. Does that one work?
Let's see.
Perfect.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so in that link, which I'm also showing on my screen right now, we've got like basic user journeys. Again, this doc is, as you can see, this is created in August of last year when I originally came up with this. So it might be a little old and we've probably changed some things, but that gives you a general idea of our user types. We have donors and recipients. Those are the kind of main two users of our platform. And then additionally, we have website visitors and admins. There's a couple main user stories. Donors come to the site to make donations. Some will be anonymous. And so in that case, we don't really need to collect tax information, emails, names. Others will donate in fiat. So that will come through our kind of connections with Stripe, and we will collect like kind of credit card information. And then just to get a little bit more granular, there's two different ways you can donate. Some will be donating directly to a project that is like kind of has a profile page on our site and has been kind of pre-approved by our board. And then others will choose to donate probably to an OpenStats, what we call the general fund. And this is kind of a big pool of money that the 9-person board of advisors is going to kind of divvy up and distribute in a grant style fashion. So the next version of our site will be, we'll open up grant applications, and then we'll also kind of be giving out grants, I think, within 3 months, if not something at Bitcoin 21. And so we can dive into these, or you guys can take a look at them yourself. But the main flows are, you're either coming in as a donor and you want to kind of explore projects, look at different profiles, and then donate specifically to a project or the general fund. Or as a kind of contributor or recipient, you want to register to be listed on the OpenStats website. You might want to apply for grants, and ideally we'll have like kind of a profile page. So if and when you are listed, you can come back in, see how much donations you've made this month, kind of track your recurring donations, and see kind of your grant status. There's the final piece is, I guess, there's general website visitors and things. So I'll let you guys dive into that. We have also kind of what our future plans are, and we do have some requests already from people that have been using the site. But we can kind of give you a, I'll slide over here. There's this is a decent sized Figma. I mean, I've kind of collapsed everything into one file. This probably should be separated a little better, but we're on the free tier. This thing up top is actually like a grandfathered version. This was someone in the Bitcoin design community that they helped with. We're not actually using this, but I did really love what they did here with kind of like the simplicity around donating with card or Bitcoin. You'll see that our actual donation flow gets a little bit more complex, and we might want to like take a page out of this book and move back to kind of a simplified example like this. And then, so if you scroll down to this kind of middle section, these are kind of our somewhat hi-fi designs. That this is probably what our site will look more like, probably this middle one. Unfortunately, we don't have any mock-up data. Again, I think later today when our developer gets back online, we should have some updates with at least some static web pages that you can kind of play around with. And then down below here are more of our donation flows. So you can kind of imagine this would be kind of the Explore page. This is a page where a profile or a project has actually been approved. You get to learn a little bit about what they're doing, see some screenshots, see some links, and then we kind of dive into the donation flow. And so where I think we could use some help is just some like general pointers on how can we probably simplify this and make this as easy as possible. There's a couple of things that we want to we would like to prioritize, and that's like recurring donations. As much as we love the idea of getting and giving out $100,000 grants and stuff, the real goal here is to get 10,000 plebs 20 to donate like $5 a month to projects that they would really like. And so because of that, I think we could have probably done a bit of a better job kind of highlighting recurring donations. That being said, we're just trying to launch with something. And then here's some inspiration from Brink. I do like what they did here, where it's a little bit ugly, but they basically just put it front and center, whether you're doing one-time or monthly recurring, and kind of let you opt in right at the front of your experience with their website, rather than kind of after we've asked you a few qualifying questions, like, do you want this to be tax deductible? Do you want this to be anonymous? I do kind of like that. So there might be a way we can kind of flip around the user journey, where we right off the bat try and kind of get the user to opt into a recurring donation. And then this down here is actually kind of the flow for project creators or open source contributors to actually apply and have their project to be listed. We probably need to add a few more things like keyword tags here, other ways that we can ideally represent what they put here into a profile page like this. And then, all the profile page would ideally be kind of filterable or searchable based on these keyword tags. And then, right before we dive into maybe a little bit more of like the intricacies here, the last piece is we are going to open source what we can on the website. So in the future, anyone will be able to kind of create pull requests, and we'll be able to update our website when it goes live based on, maybe it's just design edits, maybe it's actually feature requests or features that people build out. But one of the first things, the first two things that I think we want to add on eventually are going to be kind of an initiatives page, where we go over so that we have our hands tied a little bit for like what projects we can list, as far as they have to be free and open source, and they have to kind of support the charitable mission of OpenSats. And so we can get a little more we can kind of give out grants a little more freely. So we can give out grants to individual contributors, developers, designers. However, because of the 501c3 status, we are technically only able to allow projects to be listed instead of individual contributors. So if you are a designer or a developer or a code reviewer, what we are asking of you now is that you list a specific project that you're working on. And yes, you might be the sole designer on that project, but from a technical standpoint, OpenSats has to pass donations through to a project or initiative, not to an individual. And so that makes it a little bit of a tricky flow. I think most people would kind of be more comfortable listing themselves personally and saying, I'm working on project A, B, C, D, E. And maybe there's a way we can kind of replicate that. What we don't want to have happen is one designer or one developer come in and list like 20 projects, and then essentially kind of DOS this page with like 15 projects that are all by the same person. So that's like a tricky kind of UX hurdle we have. And then one other piece we're thinking about in the future that we've actually, there's two more things. One is we would love to list initiatives. So for the projects that we can't support, or for anyone that's not getting direct grants from OpenSats, we are able as a board to kind of list initiatives. And so you can kind of imagine those as GoFundMe style. And I think John's put something in the chat recently, like Tallycoin style, where we maybe we have an initiative we want to support. Maybe it's building a community home at Bitcoin Beach down in El Salvador, and we're trying to raise, I don't know, 100 million sats or 1 Bitcoin for that. So there is going to be a page. You can kind of imagine it would look like this with, different projects that we're trying to fund, and then individuals could specifically fund those. That's something we haven't kind of mocked up design wise yet. And then the last piece is we've already had some requests from some of our early donators who are working on a project. So I'll just dox him. He's already publicly been contributing. Like Jeremy Rubin is working on Sapio, which is kind of a smart contract language for Bitcoin. And one thing that he wants to do is, he's working on it kind of by himself right now, or with a little bit of help. He wants to just donate and kind of offer bounties for other developers to come and start contributing to his platform. And so we don't have that feature or functionality built out, but we're trying to think about a way that we could potentially build kind of bounties into a project page that they could almost offer their own grants for developers, designers, code reviewers, security researchers to come in and contribute to that specific project. And so that's a bit of a tricky kind of UX hurdle. So I'm going to shut up now. I've been talking for about 18 minutes straight, and we can kind of start diving into UX. I can answer any questions, but I'm going to pause. So does anybody have any questions or ideas where we should start diving in maybe? I haven't ever joined one of these, so I'm not exactly sure what the flow of of the presentation is supposed to look like.
No worries. Now it's just open season at this point.
Yeah. So
sorry, John.
I was looking at the flow when you like start making the donation. The first thing is like, does it have to be tax? Is this donation? Do you want the donation to be tax deductible? And I was wondering like, what does that like? What implications to the process that the user has to go through after that? Besides providing the email address, do they have to?
The biggest thing we need for lower level donations, like the only requirement that we really have as a charity is to send out kind of email receipts. So the Otis is actually like on the donator to kind of keep the receipts and report their taxes in any specific way. There are different thresholds that we have to meet. So I think up to $5,000, all we need to do is kind of email you a receipt. If you donate more than $5,000 worth of a non-cash asset, which Bitcoin would be considered, you have to fill out some special forms. So that that's one kind of trigger that if you actually, I'll kind of pull this in off of Brink. They do a decent job walking through the flow of if you're donating Bitcoin, but there's really not a huge change in the flow from our perspective, whether you want it to be tax deductible or not. The only thing is like the reporting on your side. So on our side, we're basically we just have to provide email receipts, and then if you go over $5,000, there's this IRS 8283 form that you have to fill out. And unfortunately, you have to get your Bitcoin appraised, even though it seemingly should be pretty easy to do. So I'm actually gonna pull this in, just copy paste it.
So that might make sense to ask for how much ask how much they want to donate up front, so then you can like figure out what flow to send, what forms they're gonna have to fill out and whatnot.
Yeah.
Kind of like Brink, what you showed of Brink, how it had that thing there. Because then you can say like, well, this is not, if you want this tax deductible, you have to like state X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
You have to sign this document.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So I think we could, sorry, I'm not going to be editing this page right on it, but yeah, so I think,
comment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that is one thing that I did like about Brink down here. If I could show you, is like they kind of right away kind of put it in your face that you can do a monthly recurring donation. That's the goal. That's really what we want to promote here. Obviously, we're welcome to one-off donations, but I think that could be something we do a little better. you know, even here, for example, we kind of have make this a monthly recurring donation as like a secondary checkbox. We might want to, you know, I think it's a little bit tricky if you were to if you were to make that the default setting, but I do think we could do a better job kind of highlighting that, or making it, maybe it's just like making it a question on this first piece, perhaps even you know, sticking it here at the actual profile level where you do a one-time donation, or perhaps there's another call to action to do a recurring donation. But that's my thought. But you know, there's a million different ways to kind of execute that.
I have oh, please go ahead.
No, go on, Christoph. Go on.
Okay, I have kind of a bigger question, and I was thinking about that because my brother also works in open source, and he told me about the people he donates to, which is primarily through GitHub sponsors, and he told me about things like there are some developers who he really appreciates when what they work on, and their work has been extremely helpful to him. And he likes, you know, he follows him on Twitter too and appreciates those updates. There's another person a developer who writes books, or also, you know, has a shop that they sell mugs in. So he makes a point of purchasing some of those products too. And from listening to it, it seems like there's kind of a relationship that starts happening when you donate to somebody and you kind of like what they do. And I'm just wondering if that's common, if people really just like, okay, here's money, I'm hands off now, or if they kind of want to follow along and get updates, or if something like that. If you're looking into establishing something or facilitating these types of relationships or not. And if I'm also curious if other people if they see this similar, that there's not just an exchange, but there's also kind of a relationship or something happening.
That's really interesting. What I've heard asked for is actually different than what I've seen in practice. So I think I sponsor Jeremy Rubin and maybe a couple others on GitHub directly, and they do have that opportunity where, and I really love this as a donor, that they give kind of like monthly updates on their progress, and it just comes in as like an email in the inbox. However, as of recently, I've seen, I think Rubin and a few others actually stop doing that, and I'm not sure if that's because it's too much work on their end or what. But that is kind of going to be the expectation from OpenSats, which would be at least kind of like a monthly update on your progress in order to kind of keep your project active and able to continue receiving donations that flow through OpenSats. So I think like that is one other piece that we could do a better job here on the project page, is perhaps like highlighting some sort of opt-in where I don't even think you should have to be a donor. I think you should be able to, you know, follow any updates from a project, maybe just to kind of do your due diligence before you even want to do a donation. And then I definitely think if you are making the leap to actually go in and do a donation, you probably should be able to opt in for email updates. And I think that's something we could probably provide, because we are going to have, you know, there's kind of a call out here. Because we are going to have actually like profile pages for any of the projects or contributors who are on our site, we probably could make an easy like kind of portal for them to send out any monthly updates, and we could facilitate that on our back end with like our email server. But I think the best thing that I've seen is the GitHub sponsors way, where you do get those monthly updates. And I think that is something we'd love to replicate. I was just on a podcast, Stefan Livera asked about that feature. I know I really enjoy it. I just think if we can make it really easy for the contributors to kind of send out those updates, that would be ideal. But that is not something we have built in yet, but it is a really good idea.
That's interesting, because you don't want to just turn this into a marketing competition either, where the loudest or most active voices get all the attention, because there are a lot of people who fairly quietly do very important work.
Yeah. I definitely agree. I'm not sure. I'd be curious where you guys think, because there's probably two levels. There's probably going to be just like a monthly newsletter from OpenSats, and that would probably live on like our landing page, which is just like, you know, get general updates on maybe new projects we've listed this month, any donations that we've put out. We're 100% pass through, so part of our part of our platform is going to be being completely transparent about, you know, the donations we receive and the Bitcoin that we send out. So we'll definitely have like at least a OpenSats level kind of newsletter, but I think you know, allowing individual projects to kind of piggyback off that. Maybe it's part of that monthly newsletter. Maybe it's kind of a subsection where projects can kind of give their updates, or perhaps it's more GitHub sponsor style where you actually have, you know, 100 people that are your direct kind of sponsors, and you want to give them kind of a more nitty gritty detail of what you've been working on over the last month. But I definitely think we could incorporate that better. I'm not sure if it would be triggered by an actual donation, or if perhaps you should just be able to sign up for those kind of updates on any single project's page kind of at this level. But
I think having the updates on the products page is a really good idea, and I think that it's the kind of functionality a lot of people are going to expect nowadays, because, you know, like Patreon is, you know, incredibly popular, and, you know, you can always scroll through a Patreon page and see the kind of updates that person's posting. And the same thing with Substack, you know, even if it's a free or a paid Substack, you know, you can still kind of scroll through and like see the kind of work that that person's doing. So, I mean, I think at some point people expect that. And, you know, to Christoph's point about, you know, some people quietly make important updates. I mean, there may be some ways you can kind of coax those people into making updates. Like I could be wrong on this, but I'm not sure if people who quietly make contributions are like trying to hide what they're doing so much as they're just, you know, you get sucked into your work, and it's not everybody's thinking about like tweeting and emailing all the time. So, you know, maybe if there could just be some kind of, you know, little thing that happens on the back end of your system that's like, you know, oh, this person hasn't posted an update in 2 months. Maybe we send them an email reminder. Hey, Sally, what are you working on? Or, hey, Sally, would you like to, you know, something that sounds real friendly, like, you know, would you like to, you know, the world wants to hear what you're working on, you know, post an update here, that kind of thing.
sorry, I was muted. I think the way that we're gonna, a lot of this is manual right now. We're trying to automate as much as possible, but I think the way that our withdrawals are going to work. So let's say, you know, John's gets approved for his work on Project X as a designer. Our payouts are obviously always going to be in Bitcoin. So on the kind of smaller recurring, you know, maybe under $500 worth of donations, ideally we're going to be paying those out over Lightning instead of on chain. And so we're going to be you know, requesting a little bit of extra information from John's on his side. There is a requirement for anyone who receives over $600 a year, and this is part of like GitHub sponsors, to actually file, like we have to consider you a contractor. And so I think there's like W-9 forms that we actually have to fill out, or some sort of legal form we have to fill out. But I think on the back end, what we're going to actually require is either John's gives us his kind of withdrawal address that we can send Bitcoin directly to, or some sort of kind of layer 2 Bitcoin node, or, you know, what his node ID is, so we can actually send those funds over Lightning. And perhaps, like, instead of us just pushing out, you know, $500 worth of Bitcoin, $1,000 worth of Bitcoin every month, what we would probably do is require John's to log in and like reconfirm that, you know, this is his address every month. And maybe that would be a good time to prompt him with, hey, you know, give us a quick update of, you know, what you've been working on this month. Can you also confirm that this is maybe your node ID or your withdrawal address that you would like your monthly funds to be sent to? That seems like, in my head, that could be a good time to prompt for it, but maybe that's asking a little too much.
I think that sounds great, actually.
Johns, what do you think?
I was gonna. I think some of it's already been answered a little bit, but I was going to ask more about the kind of renewal process. So how are you guys handling it in the event that, yeah, after a couple of months, a designer, developer's doing really good work, but all of a sudden maybe they go rogue a bit and they're not contributing as intensely as maybe they once were before? I'd imagine the average person is going to need updates from that project and are unlikely to be watching GitHub projects and the comments and the pull requests and all of that kind of stuff. So is it your team and your board that are pretty much deciding on whether or not to continue hosting this project or not? And if so, like how will you handle the process of like notifying all of their donors about, you know, them no longer being hosted on the site?
So I would say the bar for getting listed on the site just as a project that's going to have a landing page and will be able to accept donations is a little bit lower than what the expectation will be if you're actually getting a grant from the general fund. And so I think the expectation for, again, we're kind of making this up as we go along. We don't have the perfect process or anything. Ideally, everyone, you know, is just like staying up to date if they're receiving funds, but I know that that's just like a bit unrealistic. So I think that's something we kind of need to consider and potentially make very public from the get-go, because what we don't want to do is just like cut off someone's funding, you know, and kind of like, we don't want to blackball or anyone from the platform. We don't want to blindside anyone with you know, any expectation of recurring funding eventually getting cut off. And to be honest, as long as they are contributing to free and open source work, we intend that, you know, and the community wants to keep funding them. Who are we to say that should be the case? But if someone were to totally disappear off the scene and kind of like completely stop contributing in any sense, then I think it would be irresponsible of us probably to continue, especially like you know, collecting donations on their behalf, especially if there are recurring donations. So I'm not sure.
Sorry to cut you off. I was going to say, even on the site itself, where you've got like that little kind of learn more information where it's like implications of anonymous donations, and maybe you want like another page dedicated to like, if you are making reoccurring donations, here's some good ways that you can track this person's progress, whether it be someone who's more technically inclined and wants to watch GitHub projects, or whether it's simply just following someone's Twitter account or reaching out to that person or whatever it might be. It might be a good idea to provide some guidance on how to track the progress as well of the project. That could be useful.
Yeah, I think these are all like edge cases that get really tricky. I think setting up some sort of, I don't know if it's like a 1 strike, 2 strike. I mean, it's 3 strike policy, but I do like the idea of, you know, if you are listed on our site, you know, our expectation would be at least you confirm, you know, that you still have access to your Lightning node or your withdrawal address, you know, because we don't want to be sending Bitcoin out into the ether and just lose donations. So I think, you know, a baseline expectation would be if you have an active profile, that you would come in and at least confirm where your money is going to. Sorry, I'm going to try and not dox my family here. It's too late probably. But essentially, you know, if the expectation is that you come in once a month,
I'll cut it out for you after.
It's okay. I'm pretty doxed. But if the expectation is, you know, you're coming in once a month and you have to confirm your node ID to receive Lightning withdrawals or to confirm your withdrawal address, that's like a little bit of a, like, you know, a sign that you are still actively contributing. But I do like the idea of potentially tying in, I think what Christoph was saying, or it might have been Stephen was saying about the monthly updates. And I think it's up in the air, like what our expectations are. So it's, if you guys have any suggestions, you know, I think at the end of the day, it will have to be a board decision. So there's 9 people on the board, including myself, that I really trust to try and make these decisions that would be really tough for any one person to make. But yeah, I mean, if someone just disappears for 3 months, you know, doesn't update their withdrawal address, doesn't confirm, doesn't do any kind of public, you know, emails that say, here's what I'm working on, that we would probably have to think about maybe either maybe not delisting the project, but delisting them as a recipient of funds. I'm not sure. That's probably going to be pretty tricky to execute. But again, I think it's like we kind of need to protect donors a little bit and make sure they're not just contributing to a dead project. So I would be curious on any feedback on what that might look like.
I have some thoughts, though they're not specific to what you're asking. It's more about other things that you've asked before. You know, as far as the subscriptions go, I do think that if you want for them to encourage subscriptions, that has to be like the first thing, the first option that people have, and the other one has to be a little bit less highlighted. When it comes to updates, it would be interesting maybe if the board had some favorites to highlight some of those on the homepage. So you don't just highlight projects, but maybe you could highlight some updates, and maybe people could, I don't know, either get encouraged or learned a little bit of what could be updated in their own projects. And I think that there may also be some people who want to support a specific categories, and I don't know how you would divide these up, like if it's core contributors, if it's designers, for example, or something like that. At one point in time, maybe you could have, when you have enough projects per category, you could either have a place to select them so you could see only the projects with that category, or maybe there's also a way that people could donate to a specific category and not just a specific person. And when it comes to limiting people's projects, maybe you could have a limit of like 3 projects per designer or developer or something like that. I don't know. So they could have like their own homepage, and then they could have a maximum of projects that they have up there to support. And I think, well, and I don't know, eventually it would be nice to be able to have some kind of notification when they do update their site. And
yeah,
if you're checking in, and I don't know if you're able to create an account eventually or not, so that you could get a little notification for it.
Yeah, I think we could hopefully get in the cadence of like monthly updates. I like the idea of potentially just having like, I don't want to spam people with like newsletter things, but you know, if we're paying out on the 1st of every month, the expectation could be you go in and kind of confirm, you know, confirm your withdrawal address before the end of the month, and then maybe give your short update, and we can kind of compile everyone's into a newsletter. I do like the idea of highlighting updates on the front page instead of like specific projects. It would feel like we're kind of picking and choosing winners if we were kind of highlighting projects. I like what Bitcoin Dev List does, where they rotate what everyone does. And then the idea of donating to specific subsets and categories, I really do like. So I'm not sure if we actually showed what this would look like if you're like filtering by category and stuff, but we did have that idea. In fact, we had one exchange. We haven't had a really large donation from an exchange yet, which is what I'm hoping we can get. Sorry, there's an ambulance going by me. But one of them was really interested in what you were saying, which was instead of giving $50,000 to you know, a specific developer or a specific project, what they were hoping to do was just kind of distribute it across, you know, all of the Lightning developers that were on our platform. But in the same sense, you could imagine maybe someone just wants to give $100,000 to designers that are working on Bitcoin wallets, or maybe it's designers who are working on layer 2 wallets. And I think that that's probably a feature that we won't roll out with initially, but it could tie really nicely into like, it's like a nice middle ground between I want to donate to a specific project or person, and I want to, like, I have no idea and I want to donate to the general fund, I think there could be a nice middle ground where it's like, I still don't really know exactly who I want to give to, but I know I'm really interested in contributing to layer 2, or I know I'm really interested in contributing to code reviewers, or maybe it's security research of hardware products. But I do love the idea of being able to like filter. You can almost imagine the flow would be like filtering here on designers, and then maybe there's an option that just says like donate to the pool or something, or like donate to everyone, and kind of split your $50 across everyone. But that is a flow that I think is really interesting, and I imagine a lot of people would be interested in giving in that fashion.
I am so from my prior experience with this stuff, I'm wondering what I'm just thinking of different use cases. I wonder what, because there was one time I received crowdsourced community funding for something. Those were, for that I made a proposal and I said, hey, this is what I've done so far for the project. This is what I'm going to do. It's going to I will work on this for 3 months, roughly this amount of hours every month. These are kind of the monthly salary or rate, and then it was kind of that could be compared to other people who'd gotten funding through that community system, funding system. And then, it was agreed upon, and people donated, and then it was shared. That money was shared out to me every month or so as I completed phases of the project. So it was very, very kind of tight. And then there were also other people in that system. Some people did translations. Somebody just spent 2 months and did some promotional videos, but then didn't do anything for half a year. So it was kind of short-term engagement. I could see things like that happen with designers too. Like somebody is really into branding and they're just going to work on branding for a couple months for a certain project, and then maybe they don't do anything because whatever, their life takes over, or they have other freelance work or so. I'm trying to think through some of these things where it's not one person continuously working for a long period of time, and I'm curious if you have insight into that.
So this is definitely a challenge that we're thinking through, and it's honestly one of the more complex ones, because right now we kind of have a one-to-one mapping for our MVP. We're just keeping it simple, and it's basically every project has one person associated with it on the site, and that's just for simplicity purposes on our end. But that's really not how the world works. Like, let's just take BTC Pay server, for example. There's 20 maintainers, there's some designers, there's some code reviewers, there's obviously kind of a lead maintainer. And so what we don't really have is a great way to have like projects segmented into different efforts within that project. So I think in a perfect world, and this is actually, one of our first things we need to figure out is, Project Infinity here is the example. There might be 3 designers working on it. There might be 1 code reviewer. Maybe someone is doing like a public audit of the code, and then maybe there's like 10 developers working on it. Well, right now on our site, there's really only, this is only going to be associated with 1 person, and that's Joe, who's ideally the lead maintainer of the project. And so if that project receives $100,000 in funding, which would be a lot, but like ideally, that's the level we get to. It would be, under this current kind of regime, it would be we let Joe, we send Bitcoin to Joe, and he kind of distributes it at will. I think what would potentially be better, and this is again a feature request we've had, is like maybe as a contributor, I specifically want to donate. Like Zeus is a great example. I love Zeus, and I think like their backend is great, but like I would specifically be willing to donate for design efforts on the Zeus wallet. And so maybe within a project, you could have subsets that say like, I want to donate to a security audit, or I want to donate to another core contributor, or I want to donate to a designer. But I think to solve your problem of like, if someone is on and off the project, how are we solving that right now? The best thing I have is like, we are ideally distributing these funds to like the lead contributor or lead maintainer of the project, and kind of putting the onus on them to distribute funds out to the other team members. I don't think that's perfect. In fact, I can poke a million holes in that. But that's the best thing we have right now. And I think you know, we could probably come up with some clever ways to help that lead maintainer kind of decide how to distribute, or potentially let users opt in to how they're going to distribute those funds. But I think that's more on the side of like segmenting for specific subsets of a project. It doesn't really solve the challenge of, like you said, if a brander or like someone was working on branding for 3 months, did a great job, and then disappears. You know, like there's one problem on the side of like, do we just allow that person's profile to kind of still sit there on the project if they're not maintaining and collecting funds for donations? And then even furthermore, if, you know, if someone were to donate to design or branding efforts as like a subset of that project, you know, how are we actually going to distribute those funds? I mean, there's so many challenges to address here. It's hard, which is why we're trying to launch with something and then kind of prioritize like the basic features that we think would be most helpful in the near term. But yeah, it's going to be tough. There's so many edge cases here to think about.
Something
Yeah.
you could,
No, it's. Oh, please go ahead.
Sorry, I think my fan has activated on the computer. So if you can't hear me, let me know. You know, one possibility that you could look into is a little bit like what songwriters do when they get royalties. Usually what you have is like this company, or you could have like a project manager. And what happens is that you decide the percentage that they get out of donations. So the company gets something, and then the writer gets something else. And if there's a contributor to that, they get a different percentage. And sometimes it's the people that, or most of the time, it's the people themselves that decide, you know, or the company itself that decides. So if you have like a project manager and more people get involved, they could have an option to pick a percentage somewhere. And when it comes to like these projects that could have specific timelines, you could have something like that. You could have something that you say, I'm going to work on this for 3 months. And then at the end of 3 months, your project kind of stops taking in donations, or you add an extra layer to it that says the next 3 months will be for something else. But the previous one is kind of, it could be there, but it wouldn't be taking donations for that. I don't know. It's an idea. And
it seems like, yeah. No, I mean, it's similar to what you were saying. It seems like if you have, I mean, everything is always glued together by people. These types of things, right? You have your forms and you have your pages, but then you have all these human dynamics between things. And it seems like the onboarding experience, when somebody signs up for a project, there could be different descriptions. Like I'm doing this for myself. I'm representing a group of people. And then the monthly updates might also become more of an importance if it is up to one representative distributing those funds. And then, you know, I might want to see like, okay, did the money that I donated, did it really go into a design contribution, or was it used somewhere else? So that puts more emphasis on the project updates, because it's not so direct. It's not exactly what I see is what I get when I donate. There's another process there that's happening that could be very different based on each project.
Yeah, I actually really like the idea of kind of having a PM or, you know, lead maintainer in charge of the project who could allocate pretty transparently allocate and redistribute, you know, a percentage of that fund's kind of earnings to whoever the contributors are. And I could imagine, you know, it's going to be hard for us to track 100 different projects on this site, but each lead maintainer is going to know, okay, well, you know, John's didn't do shit this month. Like we're going to lower his percentage down from 20% to 10% or 5% until we see more from him. And I think like, I like putting that onus on, you know, the people closer to the project. And I also think that kind of adds in a feature where that kind of solves one of the challenges we have, which is, you know, maybe, you know, I'm trying to think who else is in here. Maybe Alexa is coming in and saying like, oh, this is a sweet project. Like, I really want to start contributing. I see there's like 2 other designers on the project and it's being maintained by Connor. But maybe I can apply to be listed, and earn some funds in order to start contributing to this in the future. And maybe he starts her out at 2% and sees what she does for the first month. And if it's good work, it kind of gets bumped up. But I really like the idea of kind of this dynamic fund allocation maintained by a project's kind of PM. And I think that's like, it's one of the most logical structures here, because it's just going to be hard for us. Like if I keep going back to like BTC Pay Server or like any of these larger projects that have so many contributors and maintainers, like it's really hard for us to like kind of pick and choose who's getting funding. And I think being able to kind of rely on one kind of point person for each project is what probably makes the most sense. And it's gonna force us to have like different layers of profiles where we have like administrators and that are able to like kind of set out percentage allocations. But that seems like the best solution I've heard so far to kind of that challenge.
There's only about 8 minutes left or so. Is there anything urgent, anything that you really want to talk about, anything you'd like to show or discuss?
I think maybe the one thing that I would love to get some feedback, and again, I can open this page up to the community, so at any point you guys can come in here and kind of make comments, make edits in the future for iterations. And again, we're also going to be open sourcing this, and so it'll be live on our GitHub page for anyone. But I think like our early beta version that like we're trying to launch before Bitcoin 21, if possible, is just going to be a site that has 10, 20 projects. It's going to be one-to-one mappings of contributors to a project. And I think what we could do a better job of is actually pushing this like recurring donation, which right now kind of lives as a checkbox under this one-time donation amount, which actually lives behind this first page, like wall of questions, which is tax deductible and anonymous, which lives behind this button that says donate. And so I think like, I don't know, maybe it's just like as simple as, having this donate button on the landing page of a project, say like donate in a recurring fashion. But I think like bringing that more to the forefront and trying to prioritize the fact that we want these recurring donations could be really helpful. And I think that like someone with a design eye of how to like do that cleanly, that could be like a tangible recommendation that we try and implement before we launch.
Just one extra thought on that. So they are, just by making recurring the default and having users click onto one time is obviously a way to push them towards that. I'm also curious but I mean, those type of things can be seen as dark patterns. You're trying to manipulate people into giving
it feels a little
deceptive. You could, but maybe there's a point to be made. Maybe there's a point to be made about that can be explained that says that repeated recurring donations are better because open source works in this way where people contribute over long periods of time and blah, blah, blah. Maybe there's actually an explanation that can be given to people at that moment why it's not just about extracting more money out of them, but why this makes sense, why this is more appropriate.
Yeah, I don't personally feel like it's a dark pattern. It's not like this is health insurance or car insurance or something that somebody vitally has to do. I don't feel like we're manipulating them. I feel like if someone, like, let's say they want to donate $1,000 worth of Bitcoin to this project, I mean, you could maybe we could just say that you're just trying to get them to think about it instead of a one-time donation of $1,000 to like a 6-month donation of somebody else. Do the math right now, but a 6 months donation of like $200 a month or something like that. That it could ultimately end up being the same amount of money for them, but just kind of spaced out differently. Yeah,
and we could do that in a couple ways. We could actually facilitate, just the release of funds. We could like force HODL for them where, over the next 5 months, you could still donate one time $1,000. We're going to convert it to Bitcoin. And that might technically go up in, fiat value over time, but we'll just distribute that. So maybe that is like an option we could put of like, if you have a one-time donation amount, we could have like a setting that says, you know, like to be distributed over 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. That could be really interesting. I like the idea of also just like providing information, because at least with our talks with like core developers and contributors, they do prefer kind of that that like spread out donation style. Now, I don't know if they like the idea of, if someone actually wants to give them a $100,000 donation, forcing them to like get it over 6 months. But you know, the idea of like a steady stream of income is kind of preferable based on the conversations I've had with people. And then the last piece, I know you asked for, oh, sorry. I know you asked for some tangible advice. I think like maybe the last piece is like, we should think about like having a newsletter sign up or some way. I don't think we have this on here, but it would probably just be like something like this, where we say like, do you want to receive monthly updates? And if so, provide your email address. So I think that's one thing that I also was thinking about. Sorry.
Well, sorry, I was just going to say that actually splitting larger payments into smaller recurring monthly payments is actually better for the donor, because in that sense, they're also encouraged to hold the projects accountable. So for example, instead of giving $1,000 over 6 months, giving 200, or sorry, $1,000 1 month, giving $200 every 6 months, might be actually preferable, because after 2 months or $400 of donations, they realize that actually the money is going towards, you know, providing enough Coca-Cola for the founder. That might be something that they actually want to withdraw their donation from over time. So it could be preferable that way. Also, another way for a newsletter in terms of getting people to opt into newsletters and things like that is just like, well, at the point of donation, perhaps you can say, well, uncheck this box if you don't wish to hear recurring updates from this company. But again, we can find some dark UX patterns for that.
Don't uncheck this box if you don't not want to receive the
Okay. I have one counter argument I feel is worth discussing here. Just to play devil's advocate and look at the other side of this as well. Why wouldn't you want recurring monthly donations? Though I do like the idea, and I think it's a very good one that should be implemented. But you know, so we've gone down this rabbit hole of updates and how that's going to happen and all that. What if you end up in a situation where somebody's doing really important work, and maybe they totally want to give updates and they're happy to give updates, but the work takes a lot of time to like build up and to get things rolling, and you know, it's like any update that they could possibly provide for the first 4 months of the project is going to be really boring. Like, yeah. And especially I've seen when people, like, particularly on the design side, when people are doing like research and stuff, there's a lot of like legwork of like finding people and, you know, doing all kinds of an analysis, and the end result is really exciting and informative. But the first several months, there's a lot of like kind of administrative work they have to do. And so that to certain types of projects, that could be a downside. So I don't know if maybe it's worth thinking about, you know, when the person is signing up for a project, like trying to guide them down like a different path of like, is you're the kind of project that needs like, you know, guaranteed funding for a finite period of time, or is your project the kind of thing that needs recurring funding that may be more volatile but is hopefully recurring? I don't know.
Yeah, it gets tricky, and this is some feedback we've got from others too. Is like if you're a developer, for instance, you can kind of there's different ways. I've heard some people say like, oh, it should be the lines of code written. That should be how we evaluate you. And like some people are completely opposite. It's like they prefer net negative ads where you're pulling out lines of code. And then designers might be doing user research for 3 months, and there's like nothing you know, a whole lot more tangible than kind of them learning or having some like kind of user persona docs and things like that. So it's a bit unfair to like grade everyone on the same kind of path there. And I think that's where we expect to get like a little more granular when we give out grants from the OpenSats General Fund. And that's when we're going to be talking to the contributors to make sure that like the expectations are set for what we expect if you're getting a $20,000 grant from us. But I think the the standard or like the bar to hit is probably going to be a little bit different for any projects that are just listed on the site and receiving direct donations from donors. And yeah, again, I wish I had the magic bullet here and had an answer for you, but it's tricky.
I think it's one thing which also just pops to mind, which may be worth thinking about, is grants all given all at once, especially in Bitcoin, are great, particularly if the price of Bitcoin is to appreciate over the course of that grant. If it depreciates massively and they get the grant all at once, then that's sometimes quite problematic. Holding, or at least then doing recurring payments, especially if someone is paying by card, it basically sort of denominates like a dollar value as opposed to a Bitcoin value, which just could create a bit more stability for the reoccurring payments. Maybe just worth thinking about.
Yeah, so our that's kind of inherently a risk of our treasury strategy, which is we don't want to hold fiat funds. And I think we chose that just because, one, I think long term that's going to help more than it hurts for most of these people who are receiving Bitcoin donations. But like you can imagine, if we're in a bear market for a year or two, that having a spread out fiat donation where you're kind of DCAing on the way down would look better in BTC terms than collecting a big one-time donation. But that's like an area we don't really want to get into, is like trying to time the market and become traders. It gets really tricky. So like our treasury strategy is basically, if there's fiat in our bank account, get it out of there as fast as possible, and we can hold the Bitcoin for you and distribute it over time. But I think that's like kind of playing with fire. We could definitely try to like incentivize. I think that ties more into like, if you're about to give a one-time $1,000 donation, we could say, do you instead want to make this 5 1 month donations of $200 where we actually don't take the fiat out of your account yet? I think that's like a more palatable way to address the problem than us trying to like hold fiat and time things. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but I just think we're not in the business of trading here. We're in the business of converting whatever fiat we have to Bitcoin.
Cool. I'm gonna butt in on that note because our time's up and I want to just respect everyone's time. But thank you so much, Ben, for presenting today. You can stop. Jump. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, we have the Figma files. So everyone, feel free to leave some comments and stuff. I've left 1 or 2 already in there, and I will do so some more after this call. Yeah. So again, feel free to follow up with Ben as well outside of the Figma file on Slack or any other channels. And yeah, this is a super exciting project. Like, I'm sure everyone here is very interested to see how we can help grow the contribution space as a whole. And yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of circle back in a couple of months' time to see how you guys are getting on.
Yeah, we could definitely use the help. The designer who helped with the